It is the middle of December. I'm harvesting the last of my Napa cabbage and some daikon radish, some carrots, and some green onions to make kimchi. Cam spent a few years in Korea before we were married, and when he got back and after I met him, he had me try some kimchi. And at first I didn't really love it, and then fast forward a few years into our marriage, I started to have all of these health problems, and one of the things that really helped me was fermented foods, and especially fermented vegetables. I couldn't really do any fermented dairy, but fermented vegetables really helped me a lot, along with having our sourdough bread and fermenting some of our wheat. So that is why we make a lot of kimchi. I eat it just about every day. It really helps my digestive health to stay where it needs to be, and I've felt so much better since I've introduced it into my diet. For this particular kimchi recipe, I start out by making a brine, and what that brine consists of is 2 gallons of water to 2 cups of unrefined sea salt or any salt without additives. So you can also half the amount that I do. The recipe does make a lot of kimchi. It makes 2 gallons worth. And on this particular day, I was making 3 gallons worth of kimchi. I just make it bigger or smaller, just depending on how much cabbage I have at a certain time. When I brought my cabbages inside, I washed them all in cool water, and then I remove and reserve a few of the large outermost leaves of the cabbage for later. But with the remaining cabbage, I slice the cabbage into halves or quarters and then place them all into that brine and put weights over the top. Then you let the cabbage soak for 4 to 6 hours, and after you soak it, you remove the cabbage and let it drain in a colander, but you want to reserve about 3 cups of the brine for later. Sometimes it's a lot less than that, just depending on how much water is already in your vegetables when you pick them. The next step is to chop up the cabbage into bite-sized pieces and then put it into a very large bowl. And after that, I take my daikon radishes. I had rinsed them off, but I do not peel them at all because it comes from my own garden, so I'm not really worried about anything being on there other than a little bit of dirt, and then I just rinse that off, so it's fine. And I put them in the food processor. I shred them that way because it's so much faster, and I can do a lot at one time. And I do the same thing for my carrots. I just shred them in the food processor, and then I can add the carrots and the radishes to the bowl.
Like that. Very low temperature, so not look so
I'm headed out to the garden to grab some green onions. I use these in my kimchi if I have them. Some years I don't have them, and I'll just use regular onions. My recipe is not authentic at all. It's basically like homestead kimchi, use what you have and make it work. So that's what I do. It tastes really good in the end. So we have had a lot of really cold nights, like down to 15 degrees and below. So I'm hoping that they're still alive out here. If not, I'll just use yellow onions. So let's check. Pull up this whole clump here. Those look good. So yesterday I started the kimchi. We had family in town, and I got about halfway through, and then I had to take my kids places, and then I had to make dinner. And by the time I got all of that finished up, I was super tired and I just went to bed. So I covered the kimchi. That is not the ideal way to do it. It's best to just do it all in one day. I'm just telling you that right now, but sometimes life happens, and that's what I did. So today I'm hoping to wrap it up really quick, because again, I have some things in town that I need to go do pretty quick here. So I'm gonna add, I still need to add my onions and I need to add ginger, garlic. You can add a little bit of sugar. I usually do add some sugar. That's like an optional thing. And the other optional thing is adding some sweet rice flour. It's just a textural difference. One is like thicker like a paste, and the other is really thin because it doesn't have that thickener in it. The other thing that I need to add is the gochugaru for the pepper. This is just a Korean pepper flake. It's sweet and spicy. It's really good. This one I bought online and it's really good, not very spicy at all. I used this my first couple of years, and then 2 years ago I grew my own Korean peppers and dried them. You see here, they're really tiny, and made them into my own powder. These ones, I don't know if I did something wrong or what, or if it's just a different variety. They are super duper spicy. This is not as spicy. So I have been mixing half this and half this so I can actually eat the kimchi because these are so spicy. I even took the seeds out and everything before I blended it down. They're really hot. And I want my kids to be able to eat it too. So I'll add that, and I think that's about it. I take the ginger and I mince that up really fine. This is one of my favorite parts of the kimchi is ginger. And then I chop up the green onions. I also peel and then slice a regular yellow onion very thin and add that into my bowl of vegetables. And then the final thing is a lot of garlic. And I chop that up really fine as well. So I'm adding the onions and then the garlic and the ginger. And then finally I'm adding the gochugaru, a little bit of mine, a little bit more of store-bought, and then a little bit of sugar, and then some of that sweet rice flour, and I stir it all up together. So the next step is I put it into crocks, and sorry in advance because I was actually in a big hurry on this day, so I was really rushing to get it into the crock. And once you get it all in there, you put the weights on, and if it doesn't have enough liquid, that's where you add a little bit of that reserved liquid. You really only want just enough liquid that it covers the vegetables. You don't want to add too much of that reserved brine, or else it'll really water down the kimchi and not make it taste as good. I was having Dax help me on this, and he threw the veggies on the top, but really they should be submerged in the brine. So we went back and fixed that. You may have seen I also forgot to add those set aside whole cabbage leaves. Those go over top of the veggies so that none of them float up over the top. But actually the weights that I have, they keep the veggies down pretty good. So I didn't go back and add those, and I didn't have any problems. But usually you would add that whole cabbage leaf, then add your weights, then any additional liquid that you needed. One of my crocks has a water seal lid, which is so nice. You just put the lid on and then you fill the little trough with water, and so it automatically sort of burps it for you. My other crock, I just put a plate over the top and it still does just fine for me. Ideally, you want to let it ferment in a cool, dark area for 7 to 28 days. You can begin testing the kimchi at 7 days, and then if it's not pickled enough or it doesn't have enough flavor for you, then you can keep fermenting it even longer. On average, I'm doing about 14 days. And then when the ferment is finished, you remove the kimchi from the crock and place it into individual mason jars with lids. You could keep it in the crock, but in my case, I'm reusing these crocks to ferment other things, and it's easier for me to store the kimchi in individual jars. After you're finished fermenting the kimchi, it should be stored in the refrigerator. It can be stored in a root cellar as well, but the key here is to keep it cold enough that the ferment doesn't keep going. So you want it around anywhere from 32 degrees Fahrenheit to 50 degrees Fahrenheit ideally. And under these conditions, the kimchi will stay fresh for 9 months to 1 year.